Hey guys, did you like my April Fool's video? Okay, but today we're gonna actually talk about something useful. Here we have a function that has one parameter, does some code, and then also returns something. Well, imagine that this function is actually readable, and you know what parameters it has, what it does more or less, what it returns. But what if you don't have this function visible and you're in some far place outside of that function? Usually you would just have to remember how to use that function and you kind of get no help. But if we try to use something like control click, we see this nice window that has all of the parameters. It also says whether they are optional. Here it says what it returns, and control clicks return nothing, so it says void. That's what void means, by the way. And then per every parameter, you have an explanation of what that parameter is for. And once you go to a different parameter, it actually changes the explanation as well. Well, don't actually worry, because that is something that you can do yourself. So when you type slash star and another star, the language extension for HKV2 automatically expands it into this thing. Now make sure to press enter, because here you have this magic. Now every time you create a new line, it automatically adds a star there. Why is that useful? Well, imagine that this entire thing is in a class, so it's indented. Well, you can still have your nice formatting because it's limited by these asterisks. So, what do we do with this? Let's actually check out all of the magic things that I'm going to explain. Well, first of all, private. How do we do that? First of all, let's start with the most obvious thing that you should be adding and remove these for now. So, what does this function do? This function executes code. And now when we try to call funky, we actually see this message, the one that we wrote. So this should be the first thing that you write in your blog comment. It might not matter, maybe this will work at the end as well, but it makes sense to be at the start, and at least I'm sure that it works this way. Okay, now we have a param name to take care of. Okay, so we type in param, then optionally, if you want to, and I really recommend that you do, the type of the parameter in curly brackets. So say param name is actually a string, and you can type in anything that you want here, but try to abide by the actual types that exist in AutoHotkey. Or if you expect an instance of some class as the argument, then you can just type in that class. Maybe you have like my class and you expect an instance of my class in this case, but okay, we'll leave as string. And now make sure to name your parameter, because everything after is the actual message that explains what this parameter is for. So maybe, okay, it's a useful parameter. Cool. Now when we go back here, as you can see, it's indeed a parameter, param name, so it would be the actual parameter name, but I'm just working with examples here. The type, a long dash, and then an explanation. And now also let's discover how do you do multiple lines in a parameter explanation, or pretty much anything that starts with this. So let's continue this line with it's very useful and go back to C. As you can see, it combined these lines as if they're on the same line, meaning that you can spread your explanation over multiple lines. So when you see it in like actual code, it's going to be easier to read. However, how do we split these lines onto multiple ones? Let's try this thing. And as you can see, it does indeed work. So this entire thing that you're seeing here in the block comment, it mostly uses Markdown. So if you know Markdown, it's gonna get much easier to figure all of this out. But in Markdown, to have an actual line break, that's what it's called there, basically separating lines, you need to do 2 line breaks. So in this case, there's a empty line, although do remember the asterisk, I'm pretty sure it's important. And then it actually spreads the lines between. Okay, now let's explore some extra stuff. So let's wrap this in asterisks and see what happens. It makes it italic. And if we go back and do it again, it should be bold. And it is indeed. What if we do it another time? Then bold and italic. Okay, let's do this. As you can see, it's also italic. So just like Markdown, I'm probably gonna forget a few things about how all of this works. So it's better to just learn Markdown, because you can pretty much expect what you could from Markdown. There are also lists. So let's try this. First, and then second, and third. Keep in mind that this now has 2 stars at the start. The first one being the actual comment like thing, and then the stars that are meant to be for lists. And as you can see, there's a list. And I think you can even create tables, but I'm gonna stop explaining Markdown and just go on to explain the specifics of how the extension handles essentially function comments, let's call them that, like doc strings, JS doc. It's called many different things, and I am not sure what's the correct one. So if you want to learn more about these kind of things, learn Markdown, because everything that is in Markdown you can kind of expect to work here as well. Okay, so we have param that explains a parameter, and let's create another parameter, param name 2. I am not original. At the end of the day, I'm a YouTuber, so what do you expect? Param name will be an integer, or you could just specify number if it's an integer or a float, or you can specify float or boolean, or I don't know, expression. I use expr very often, like expression. It's essentially pass anything that is an expression, like it doesn't matter. It usually does, but maybe doesn't in some cases. So let's name it param name 2, and oh my god, it's also useful. I am never going to actually come up with good examples, but I'm gonna show off some of them in my actual code a bit later in the video. So here we have the first parameter, and then when we enter a comma, or well, actually give it a parameter like string once again, we move on to the second one. The previous explanation disappears. Wait, I know from watching my own videos that you can't see my cursor, so here you go. This disappears, and we come to the second explanation of the second parameter. And as you can see, the explanation of the entire function still stays no matter what. Okay, great, it works. So that should be it for the param. Now, when you have a function, the most important things to know is the parameters and also what it gives us back, so what it returns. So you do that in a very similar fashion. You can either type return or return z. It doesn't matter, pick your favorite one, but I personally use return z, I think. Let's actually check if I'm lying. These are, yeah, I use return z, actually. Well, here you go. So maybe it returns GUI object. You can type that in if you want to. But here you don't actually name it because you don't name stuff that you return. It's my GUI. And now we come back here. We see this returns at the very end that has the type once again and the explanation for it. Great. Now let's go further. Okay, explanations on an example function like this are pretty much done. I'm going to be showing you real examples from now on. So, first of all, let's rediscover private. These are registers. It's actually a playlist that I have on my channel, so if you're interested, you should watch it. And this function isn't supposed to be called from outside of this class, which is exactly what private means. Essentially, while we are inside of this entire class, we can call this method. But if we come back to some literal any other place and try to like registers and then try to call that function, well, HK doesn't give you a way to restrict you from doing that, but essentially you're not supposed to. And as a developer, you probably want to specify that somehow, that please don't call this because you shouldn't, and I beg you. So the ways I do it is first of all by specifying private. So once again, let's actually try to get it. And as you can see, when we get parameter hints here, we see private, meaning please don't call this. You're not supposed to. And also by these two underscores, which, yeah, once again, you probably can't see my cursor very well. So these I usually specify to mean that this method is private, but nowadays I just use one because there's also another thing called protected. What is protected? Let me show this off in code. So let's create a class called child that extends registers. Yeah, registers. And now that method that is maybe protected, like any method that you call protected, it can't be called in this class because it's a child of the parent class that has that protected method. But once again, if you try to call it in any other place, you're not supposed to. And languages like C# or Java, stuff like that, Kotlin too, they actually give you a way to restrict you at all from doing that. HK is a, how do I call it respectively? I don't. It's a shit language, so it doesn't give you a way to differentiate between public methods, so methods that you can call from anywhere, private methods, methods that you can only call from the class itself, and protected methods, which you can only call from the class itself and the children of that class. And I explained these concepts a bit more in detail on my tutorial on them in C#. So I really recommend you watch that because it's gonna give you a bit more of a better understanding why this even makes sense to have. So the reason why I now just use a single underscore is because I used to use two underscores if the method is private and one underscore if it's protected. But turns out I have yet to have a protected method. Like, I really like object-oriented programming, but I guess I haven't found myself in a situation where I needed that in AutoHotkey, because it will just complicate things without the help of some good language like C# that would restrict me from doing stupid things, and trying to keep in mind literally everything is pretty fucking difficult. But I still recommend you try protected methods out. Okay, example. This is actually a very cool one, and let's go to this last file. That's a lot, I know, but it's actually something very, very cool. So let's actually try to use it, hover screenshot, and when we open this, we actually get code. And notice how it's in the same theme, like color theme, as your usual code is, which is just something that I love. So once again, the explanation, and then example. Example that has a title, and everything after it is just code. So essentially, here I'm showing how you're supposed to use this thing. And here's another way you can use this thing. And then I can also have another example. So I'm not limited to just one example. I can have multiple examples with different titles if I want to. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, the example, I guess, tag. I'm gonna be calling them tags, but I am probably just wrong. Sure, so the example tag, and then to have your caption, you have to use the caption once again tag. This is getting confusing, but I hope you understand. So you wrap your actual text in these caption things. Yeah, and here you get the title. Then everything after it is just code. And it's even highlighted that way in the comments, which is just incredible. I'm not sure how Thugby even managed this. This seems so fucking annoying to implement. God. Then we have another example, once again with caption tags that has the example title and then the example code. So you can put examples in your function like comments to explain how you're supposed to use that function. Very useful and overall incredible. Takes time and effort, which is why I don't do it often, and which is also why I had to search for things like example, because I don't use it often once again. Okay, extends. The class that we just had actually relates to this. So here we have another child class, which is just an error object. If you're interested in how you should make them, you can watch my video on them. So this class extends another class, and we don't really have a good way to know that like immediately, I guess. So we have to specify it somewhere that, hey, just so you know, this class extends this class. Maybe you make a child of the map class to maybe have some more specific ways of working with maps or something of that nature. Well, you can use extends and then the name of the class that you extend. And I have this in the new method, so in the constructor, but you can also probably use this in methods. Maybe some method overrides the method of the parent class, and then you can also use extends, but it's probably not as it's supposed to be. Well, oh well, I guess we're doing HK here, so it doesn't really matter. Throws is actually also a very nice one. So let's see anything here that, oh, here we go. So, throws essentially says what this method can throw, what type of error can it throw, and this specific method can throw a value error. When you just look at this method, you wouldn't know that. You would have to go here first, and maybe it's in get path. No, I guess I was just this should be deleted probably, because turns out this probably doesn't throw anything. However, the constructor does, right? Validate key does. Here we go. So validate key can throw two types of errors, and when I pull up this method by doing registers and then validate key, we can see, oh, it can throw this. Why? If the key path isn't in, oh, I see, and then another, I see. So you immediately know what will happen if you use the method incorrectly. Okay, type. You can use this for fields and properties. So here we have registers directory, which is the directory of registers, which, yeah, self-explanatory, isn't it? But are we sure what type this is? Okay, this is maybe obvious, but will this be? Valid registers. Usually you would expect this to be an array. However, in AHK, it's often surprisingly easier to work with strings like this than an array, because there's a lot of syntax in making this whole thing an array, and there isn't in just having it as a string. It also makes some other things easier. So we specify here, yo, it's a string. So when you're using it, you immediately know that. So once again, that is static. So registers, valid registers. And well, you would see it here though. So works a bit differently because you don't have brackets for fields and properties, but you can still see the description in this window. Okay, and that's it. How did I fail that? That's it. Here you go. I hope this was useful to you, and if it was, press a like, type some comment, maybe have a question or suggestion. Definitely subscribe so you don't miss my content, but most importantly, stay fresh, cheese bags, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye!